knowledge was not that heavy, and if it was, then I think you guys have digested major part of it already. So with me, I have Zain and Saurabh. Maybe a quick round of introduction. I look at data and AI initiative for Lupin Pharmaceutical.
So my name is Zain. I look at the engineering and the applications at Axis Securities. So that's Axis Direct. We're part of the Axis Bank group.
Hi. I'm Dr. Saurabh Pramanick, and I'm currently working as the Data Governance and AI Governance Officer for Bank Muscat. Coming with almost like 17 to 18 years experience, primarily working with all the leading banks as a data practitioner. So will be glad to share my insights around the same. Thanks.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about data fabric and data mesh. I believe most of you are aware of the topic. How many of you understand the difference between data fabric and data mesh? Show of hands? Very little. I think then what I'll do is I'll do a little bit of preamble between the two, the difference. So data fabric is largely centralized lakehouse kind of setup in which you have all the processes, policy framework and everything implemented centrally, while data mesh is where you have a lot of distributed ecosystem for data, and then you can have a distributed control and then a central system in between, right? And that's where data mesh works, and both kind of designs are there in enterprises, and over a period of time I think both data fabric and data mesh and hybrid approach of both is also becoming more popular over a period of time. I think data mesh provides more room for local innovations, while data fabrics, everything has to be centrally driven. So there are different models which are existing. Somewhere data mesh is heavy, somewhere data fabric is heavy, but data fabric is more recent. I think over a period of time we have seen a lot of data mesh kind of a network coming up, particularly for MNCs which are in multi countries, because there are local regulations and local policies that are there, and I think banks do that fairly well. So would be companies like us, pharma or MNCs from India, we also deal with these kind of scenarios. So we're going to talk about it, how to scale and what are the things, what are the challenges, whether to go for data fabric, data mesh or what. So with this I open. I hope it was useful. Okay. So with this, I'll quickly open for a couple of questions to Zain and Saurabh. So Saurabh, how do you think for AI scalability, self-healing and all, which one do you prefer and why? What are the reasons why you prefer one over the other?
Something which is coming from my as a thought and as a practice which I also follow and I believe. And I have heard the other leaders also in previous sessions, in other conferences also, say data is the backbone, right? So any of your data initiatives that you want to drive or you want to take, since data is your backbone, so as part of your data architectures, now coming with your traditional architecture, going a little back, few years ahead, where we have the Lambda architectures, the Kappa architectures, where the streaming and the batch processing, how you want to have the data sets having. And now data mesh, which is more decentralized. Now the 4 foundation pillars of data mesh, which is more on your data as a self-service. You have domain-based ownership, where you need to identify the domain owners. You have your data stewards identified. You have your every business people involved in as part of it. At the same time, you have self-service analytics, where now you're giving a more of a self-service based platform, not only for your actual data users, but everyone in your organization. Like I was hearing yesterday, there was a use case which we also do it. Like, let's say, for example, the chief banking officer wants to know that, I myself want to do a lot of things rather than reaching out to a data team, centralized big data team and trying to get the data. If I have a self-service platform myself and I have an AI model built on top of it, where now the AI, I just write a prompt and say, can you please create a sales, year by year sales. So ultimately the prompt is going to take the data from your backend data store. It could be a lake house, it could be, it could be a data lake, but the data has to be there, right? So to build scalable architecture, your data foundations has to be there. And then you can always implement data mesh. For example, you can go with any of your microservice-based architectures. You can try to have them in place. Build on top, you have your Dockers, you have your containers where the data could be residing. So for each of the domains, when you identify your domains, you have your finance, you have your sales, you have the marketing domains, they could be all residing in different containers, but then you still have a centralized self-service platform sitting on top of it, which centralizes data and give the outputs to your AI models on which they can feed in and identify the relationships. Now, data fabric, if you see on the other hand, what it does, it doesn't believe in that concept of centralizing the data, where the data still remains in your disparate sources, but now you have something called as a semantic layer, where the challenges which organizations normally say that, why are we replicating the data? Data is still there in your systems, and the old traditional school of thought where we had the data warehouses, we want to bring in the data into a central place. We want to, have to have those batches in place, and we are still replicating and creating the data. Now we have the entire data virtualization and data semantics part of it, where we are trying to still get the data from your respective sources. You have the connections, you have it. So what is more important is, while this school of thought is there, you have data fabric, you have data mesh, you have the core components have to be identified where your business, your owners, the data owners has to be there. You start imagining that data is not like as a byproduct, but data is like a product for you to have. Just like you have a typical product life cycle in any product-based companies where the entire concept of product from its ideation to its development, your design, to its the entire life cycle that product follows. Similarly, the same concepts of data should be now also be treated as a product. So that is very much essential. So unless and until you have these things, unless you embark and make people understand that data is gonna make wonders for you only, but you also have to start from your base. You have to embark, have your business in place, you have to get your business onboarded, you have to start creating your data journeys with respect to the quality, the cataloging, business glossaries I heard in the previous session also. That is very much important. Now, it might not be very much important for everyone. For example, the sales agents. For them, sales is still the prioritization. But then if I can identify and show them that as part of your entire sales life cycle, if you are able, we are basically giving you the power of data, you are able to use it, and you can write a prompt, you can identify the demographics, the other characteristics of the customer. That is where, you combine the power of your data, the data architectures, along with your data mesh and data fabrics components together. So different organizations are doing it in a different way. Banking organizations have been pretty much able to do it at a faster pace. The reason is their journeys with data have started quite well in advance, over the years where they have started with data warehouses, data lakes and all. So the data side of things is quite mature. So for them, AI architectures and all has been quite easy as, because regulations also drive it. So that is a kind of my school of thought.
Yeah, thank you, Saurabh. The answer was a little long and I saw half of the people actually looking into their phones. But let's keep it, we'll keep it short and interesting at the same time. At least two people are still looking at the rooftop. I hope you found something interesting over there. Coming back to it, I think very important point that you made, right? Just to add that, I think centralized provide a very good governance, simple and straightforward governance mechanism, while decentralized provides us agility and innovation, right? So, Zain, coming back to you, is if you do scale, right, enterprise-wide AI adoption, which kind of an architecture is preferred?
See, it's all about controlling the chaos, right? So the way I look at it is, you can have, if you look at what AI requires, you will say, okay, the data fabric is the way to go. But getting there, right, is the challenge. Right, so we all know what is the ideal solution, or we all may know, okay, let's have a central governance, but then you have the challenges of actually, those guys will start becoming a bottleneck. Actually enforcing it will become more difficult than actually, allowing others to keep growing. So it depends on what industry you're in. right? So industry like ours, for example, it's still on the forefront of tech, right? So we have to keep innovating to be able to keep up. So trading, so Axis Securities, as we do trading, right? It's trading in general or investing in general is still a very, very new field. Only 5%, 6% of India is penetrated in that field right at the moment. So we have to keep innovating to be able to keep up. And if we follow a sort of a data fabric across, we just start putting governance layers, it will start slowing us down, right? So it's all about hitting the balance on the chaos, right? So I think couple of examples I can give. I think that will liven up the discussion a bit as well. I'll say we had, so I think here a lot of us are, I think, with a tech background or with at least a data background or whatever it is, right? So when I ask what is downtime, right? If I go across the room and I ask what is downtime, all of us will say, okay, service was down and customer did not get the particular resource, right? That is a downtime, okay? But we went across and we tried to, now in a regulated industry, what is a downtime, right? So as a bank or as a securities broker, right? There is a proper definition for a downtime, right? So downtime is something that, for example, NPCI defines as more than 50,000 failures within 5 minutes. That is a downtime, right? Whereas you look at broking, what is the downtime? Okay, 15 minutes if the customers are not able to place an order, that is a downtime. So across domains if you go, right, you'll find that there are different definitions. And if we try to put a central governance layer to it, what will happen is that it will actually not go together. Right, so that's one of the examples that I could think of, at least for where to go with data mesh versus where to go with data fabric, right?
Interesting. New definitions of downtime.
Yeah. So if another example I can give you is that you talk about complaint, right? So you're taking any service from any company, right? You go to a bank and you put a complaint. If you look across the broking industry, right, each broker defines or categorizes complaint separately, right? To us, it may look like a complaint is a complaint, right? I wanted to do something, I could not do it, right? I wanted to place an order, I could not do it. That is a complaint, right? Whereas some brokers will say, no, you could not do it at this time. No, you could not do this particular feature, this particular thing. You could not look at your book. So that is not a complaint, it's a service, right? So getting to the crux of the data definitions, right, is actually what all this is about, right? AI is going to sit on top of all of these definitions, right? So if we're able to get clear definitions, we'll be able to get clear outputs from AI.
I think I would like to, if you allow me, I'll share one experience, with respect to data definitions. I think I totally agree and what he's trying to say. In my experience also, I came up with this situation where the management had asked us to prepare a report, right? Now, this request actually was raised with the finance team, but then we had a specific business intelligence teams who does the entire reporting aspects, and the data providers, the IT team does it. Now, each of us, they provided the same report, but you'll see the numbers were not matching. A very typical case it was. And then now the question is, which of the report is the actual report that needs to be considered? Now, this kind of a situation normally happens where your definitions are not very consistent and clear. Now, and obviously there would be things to it because finance might be thinking it from finance and knows what kind of adjustments needs to be done, what are the exclusions, inclusions needs to happen. BI might not think it from that business perspective. They will understand it, but they will not. And IT, as you know, they will purely do with the technical definitions. So it's very much important to have that consistent definitions, have those kind of things happening. But there will be times, as you rightly mentioned, where you cannot have those definitions, standardized and make the same definitions uniform across. So that's a typical case where you need to identify which of the definitions can be centrally done for the organization, which could be decentralized. Maybe at a department level, you might have to call it out differently. And then that is a kind of a journey that you will have to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. How many of you have seen this, that two different departments have been asked for one single report and they have different versions?
Many times. Many times.
At least. Wow. At least I see 5 or 6 show of hands. Rest of the people are not even aware that it happens or actually it did not happen. Okay, that means you have not seen the report, or maybe you are not seeing the report detailed enough. Now coming back to a very interesting scenario in the AI world, I think going back to what you said, right? Definitions are not consistent and things like that. Can we use AI to govern the outcome?
Yeah.
So, like we've seen scenarios when a candidate prepares a resume based on the job description, then it is screened by another AI agent at a different place, and they actually it talks about whether it is the right candidate or not the right candidate, and then the third AI agent will basically be actually doing the video interview
Yeah.
with the candidate.
I'll share a very interesting example on this. We ran an entire journey and initiative purely on creating the data definitions, creating the glossaries, and doing the data cataloging and all. Now we heavily used AI for that. So I will say how we used AI. Now, if you see banking as a domain, if you understand what are the banking terms or the business terms that are there, pretty much a banking data model doesn't change very much. Unlike for a specific bank, there could be different formats or different specific ways. Maybe the customer ID, the way the customer ID, what is the format in which the customer ID does. So what we have done is we have taken those banking definitions and the data models that exist, which is you can use a band framework, you can use an IBAN framework, and some of the data models which are very industry-specific data models. You take that as a starting point, and we started with the journey. Then what we did is a lot of the definitions which we got from the standardized, data models and things was something we used it. But then we heavily used AI models. We used OpenAI models for creating the definitions of a lot of terms. The reason is because, let's say, back in the days, 5 years or 6 years back, when I was doing a similar kind of an exercise with some of the other large banks, I used to literally sit with the business and the IT. You help me in defining what do you mean by customer ID, what do you mean by this, and we used to do this exercise manually. But now if I go to business and teams, what I will do is rather than going them with a clean slate, I will go with definitions which are very much, I'll say your standard, which is as per banking, and I'll go with them that this is a definition that is I am coming up with. Now, can you help me to fine tune and make it more specific for the bank? So half of the work, if you see, there is I'll say 50 to 60% of my work is already done. Now, a lot of the definitions might not have to be fine-tuned because it doesn't change from bank to bank, right? But there could be few terms, like for example, what is the customer ID, the format. The definitions, maybe I'll use an ISO 11179 standard, which tells me that the definition has to be very standard or very formalized. And then I say, when I explained it to the business knows, yes, this is the format and all. So this kind of, smaller initiatives, it could be a very small thing, but AI has definitely, because if you see banking terms, when I sat out and created my data model, I was having like 20,000 plus terms. And 20,000 plus terms, when I am going to create definitions manually, it will take me hell out of a year. But with AI models, when I'm just running it, it just creates it. And then the rest of the part is just a fraction of the time that the business has to just go and create those.
So what we've seen, right, is that even in banks especially, each business is a separate bank altogether. That's what we've kind of seen, right? So you look at retail banking is normally separate, corporate is separate, credit cards is separate. So they're all running their own bank within a bank.
True. In fact, we will see that they will have their own warehouses.
Exactly. So that's where we've seen definitions go haywire because some may have said customer ID, some may have said KIF ID, some may have said cust ID. Right. Getting those together, getting those formats together, some may have, no, I will generate a customer ID only after this step. Some will say, no, anytime you take any service from me, you are a customer, right? So that's where it is,
So I think that's a very important example. And also we talk about where do we really start utilizing the AI observability piece, okay? Many times the semantic layer that we are talking about, the definitions that we talk about, I think they need an extra care, and I've seen many people look at using the AI for the outcomes and the reports and doing the unstructured data query, But one of the very, very important use or uses of AI is to look at the data quality and the definitions. So when you make an AI work for the AI outcome, this is one absolutely important example that I can talk about, and important because at observation, data related observability, if you have, you can fix the issues at the ingestion level itself, and if you can fix it over there, your output definitely will be much better. I think that's one thing I wanted to in fact check. So are you using any observability tool for the data observability, which is AI?
We do, not specifically on the data side of things, we have observability solutions we are using in-house. But I know like we have Datadog and you have Monte Carlo, some of the data observability solutions, they have been quite doing a lot of those things. But one of the key challenges is, which I always say is like, what is the output coming out from the data observability? How do you ensure that that is coming? Like, you also know about data lineage solutions, right? Now, whatever the output that a data lineage solution might be giving out, who does validate and certify it? Can we just say that, okay, whether the solution has created is 100% correct? In my experience, I have seen that a lot of those things, because ultimately it's a technology. Sometimes what happens, it's all dependent on the capability of your scanners, your connectors that scans and creates code. That's the reason that is a step where your business and your technology together should be coming and trying to validate. In fact, we did an exercise which we call it as a data process flows, right? Ultimately, what is data process flow? You have the different business processes. All of it starts with your businesses. So you have your business processes. You identify all the business processes which are there. For each of the process, there would be multiple process steps. So you list down what are the process steps. You list down who are the actors or who are the people involved in each of the process steps. You also identify what are the sources or the systems that are involved. So you start with a high-level view of the systems, but then you try to identify what are tables, the columns, what are the underlying logics which is there, and then you try to create this entire map. The data process flows. Now, when you create this, then when the solution starts creating out these outputs, you take your data fabrics, right? Your data fabrics will start giving out this kind of an end-to-end view. You would always be able to identify the traceability of your data, the correctness of the traceability. And in case if there is a gap where, the system, your business teams are defining that there is a things, because a lot of times you see that there would be sometimes manual processes or manual steps, there are files getting uploaded, which your solutions might not be able to capture. So the correctness of those outputs is also very important, that's a very important part of the entire process.
Yeah.
So what I would say, see, I would connect that even to, you were talking about observability, right? I mean, from an pure engineering standpoint, I think last 10, 15 years, we've seen monoliths moving to microservices, right? So I think now it's time for even those data monoliths to move into microservices. And a big part of that will be the observability piece. The reason we're able to run microservices at such large scale is because we have the observability tools and everything, which are giving us actually what's happening real time.
Exactly.
Right? So the conversion of, what has happened, I feel, last couple of years is the conversion of the data from data information to knowledge, right? Yeah. That's what has crunched tremendously, right? So that's what we see.
So maybe one more question. How many of you have used Copilots, Microsoft Copilots? Still, not even half, say around 40-45% people. But if not Microsoft Copilot, maybe any other Copilot if you have within your organization. How many of you put together? Okay. So one question that I have, in fact, let me get a view of the banking industry from Axis and from Muscat Bank is, a lot of Copilots are being used, right? But how we look at that, which one is going to survive more? It is going to be Copilots. It is going to be products, dedicated products, specific domain-related products, or how do I see? I'm talking about more on the design aspects, right? Which one will survive more? What do you see?
So the good thing is, one is that these copilots that have come out, you spoke about Microsoft, we know Gemini, all of these guys have come up with their enterprise products, right? Yeah. So the good part is my data doesn't have to go out. It's all happening in my control, right? That's been one of the big pieces of how we've been able to utilize it. Like I said, data to information to knowledge, right? So if you ask me, for example, even 10 years, 15 years back, so in our industry, how many trades have happened today? Simple query and I'll take it out, right? Today I need to not only know that, I need to know, even real time is not enough. It has to be now predictive. And that is where all of this is coming actually. Prescriptive, predictive, exactly. So for example, if there's a news today that a particular stock, there's some news in the stock, right? Now I know that tomorrow there is going to be these many amount of trades. I can scale up my infra for it. I can scale up my data infra for it, right? I know exactly, I can even prescribe a lot of calls to customers based on that, right? So that is where these co-pilots, what has happened is we're able to give it even to customers, right? So customers don't have to be, it's completely demystifying now. So if I want to know whether my portfolio is doing well, not well, I just, what's wrong with my portfolio? And it literally, it's the same data, but it's crunched in a manner which I can consume quickly. So that's the way that we're seeing it's transforming it.
That's an India story, Saurabh. What about Muscat?
My way of looking at it is, I feel all of it will coexist, as part of the ecosystem. The reason I'm saying is, like, for example, I take the scenario of transaction screening or payment screening for financial organizations like us, that's very much important. Transactions when you're doing, and that is where you have to identify at real time, what's the customer behavior, what's the customer, the overall view, or I'll see a kind of a characteristic of the customer. Now for that, while I will rely on my internal data, the past data, historical data, there will be times that I will also have to look at the customer, if it's an organizational customer, I also have to take in look at their financials, some of their secondary, and some of the data, secondary data as well. Now that is a time where I might not rely purely on the in-house models which are there, which is only looking at my data, but I will not look or use those models for very specific use cases which is used for my operational reporting, because I don't need to have those kind of things. So my in-house models which will be hosting or relying on my internal data can still exist. So this is one of the use cases which came to my mind. Similarly, from the legal department, when we do a lot of contract reviews, from the procurement department, when we are going into vendor registration, supplier registration. So we try to take a lot of these, we want to try to take a kind of insights coming in of these kind of vendor suppliers to have a kind of a view of whether we want to have a kind of a relationship built with them. So in banking as an area, since, you take different department, customer communication or customer experience perspective, each of these departments have their own set of use cases, and that's the beauty of it, So I feel, it will be a combination of them, and you will see from a use case to perspective whether you can go with your custom models, whether you want to go with the proprietary models, open source models, or closed models. So and again, cost is one of the factor. The benefits, that cost benefit analysis also comes into.
Cost is always paid by the customer, so you don't worry about that. How many of you agree that cost is always paid by the customer? Yeah, it always goes from our pocket. But let me put a different perspective to what we were talking about. I think co-pilots, when we are talking about industry, largely when the end customer perspective we understand, right? So that's a way, that's one of the views. But when you have to consume data internally for internal consumption, when you are looking at some of the operational excellence pieces to it, you start to look at the data in a different way than your customers see. Yeah. Customers largely look at probably only 10% of your data. It is customer focused. Internally, particularly for organizations like I come from manufacturing one, from a pharma, and we also are heavily regulated industry just like banks, or maybe different regulations in different parts of the world. But what I see that if my manufacturing team has to consume data and I have to make an AI product sit on top of it, right? The data is consumed differently altogether. And I think these are the areas where we have a bigger debate whether co-pilot will be sufficient to do the job. When I talk about AI governance, AI is both traditional as well as generative, right? Now, traditional AI, I still believe, I think Gen AI or generative AI still take time to reach to the kind of accuracy and detailing that traditional AI has been. Largely also, if there has to be a mix of both, and as a mix of both means, I should be able to define what models I want to choose.
Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, every time you make a query and ask, give me a prescription about what will happen tomorrow, it will go through a different model. My repeatability gets a hit.
Yeah.
Right? And in industries like us, when we are regulated, we cannot really afford those kind of scenarios. So repeatability of the results is very important, so that I can use, or probably we can use, generative AI to generate the explainability pieces of what is there, but when it has to come to the utilization of traditional pieces of it or AI pieces of it for optimizations, global optimas for certain operations or activities, we probably need to rely on a better mix of the two. That's my opinion, but I would like to even understand from the users, how many of you as an enterprise users see that as a challenge or as a potential opportunity? So any show of hands? Or any questions that you have at this stage? Okay, I believe last half an hour we were only talking about, not everyone got it. Or maybe we talking about quite mundane topic, right? So coming back to our topic that we started with, is data mesh or a data fabric, right? We've seen certain examples, we've heard about the views. I think going forward, it is a hybrid approach that most of the people are taking, because I think while we want to deploy the governance principles centrally, we would also want to understand that locally we have agility and we have innovation adoption, certain pockets, right? So we have to give some federated governance on the AI side. Now this federated governance is not very easy concept to really implement. Of course, things are evolving as we are talking about it, but the federated governance on the data governance principles, that means if you talk about responsible AI, it may be from domain to domain. Within one function, you will have a principle which is an org-wide principle, organization-wide principle, but for a certain domain, you may actually refine that logic further for that particular domain and have it over and above the organization, responsible AI layer that you have. So those kind of federated models are also evolving. I think hybrid is the way to go. That's where more evolution is happening at this stage. However, when it comes to AI governance and the responsible AI part, I think that is an evolving area that is happening, and it's very, very important. I've seen organizations now setting up the governance bodies first upfront, then getting into the generative space of AI. I think traditional AI, a lot of organizations are already using it, right? So by far, I see that this area is evolving. Area is also evolving because I think a lot of serverless compute, microservices, and all those are being used. And on the technical side, on engineering side, like Zain said, that there's a lot of work that is happening on that side as well. Maybe if you want to talk about the engineering side, of this one.
See, what has happened on the engineering side is that we've been able to go faster. That's what it is. So that's created more and more chaos, and like you said, you need, I think, federated chaos is the way I would put it, right? Setting up a framework, setting up governance guidelines, so that we're able to move fast but in a responsible way, right? So from an engineering perspective also, you'll see we've had a lot of tools, your SAS tools, DAS tools. We've been doing a shift left approach, where security has started coming into, actual coding practices, right? Similar kind of stuff will start happening. A left shift will have to happen even on the data piece of it, right? On the data engineering piece, where you will actually have to have your governance principles actually within the data pipeline itself, right? So that's, I think, where we are going to move. I think, like you said, very, very evolving kind of a space, very raw space at the moment. I think maybe in the next couple of years, like what we've seen with microservices, this is what we'll see with even data coming up.
So as a data governance, expert, what do you think about it?
See, data governance doesn't work individually, and I totally agree what you were mentioning. So from the engineering side, there is a lot of things that we have been also doing. Like for example, OpenShift is something as a platform we have been trying to get it and integrating with the enterprise service bus, and API connectivity, API first is something that we have been trying with all the applications. One of the thing is data residency, data localization is our key prioritization. We cannot let the data go outside the country. So there have been steps that we have been trying to see that, if any kind of material data, if it exists, which is having any kind of confidential, even if we have to have any of the cloud services, is being masked, it's being encrypted and going. So it's a kind of an overall, from a governance perspective, data governance perspective, as you rightly mentioned, federated governance is something that we are doing. What we did is we started with the basics. In fact, to go data-centric, we started with the entire data organizational structures perspective. We started with that, we defined the operating model, we defined the policies, frameworks and all. One of the key challenges which we faced was, unlike the likes of JP Morgans and all, where you can have dedicated data stewards, separate data stewards identified, data privacy leads identified and all, we cannot have that liberty. So what we have to do is we have to identify the people within the organization and give them additional roles and responsibilities. So that kind of thing, it started with that, and then once you define that, when you define the organization structures and these kind of things, then your remaining journeys become start. So as a data governance, as an AI governance officer also, while I'll work very closely with the architecture teams in defining what is the technical architectures and all, I also have to make equal contributions and interact with the business and trying to make them understand why these kind of things are happening within the organization as part of the overall governance initiatives.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you, Zain. So the time shows that it's already up, but we can probably look at one question, or maybe we can entertain the questions later on. We have a couple of show of hands. Yeah. Thank you very much.